Hola, amigos. Welcome to Vibin With G. I'm going to be having a very special guest, a Chilean-Canadian journalist, Thomas Nef.
Graham, how are you? Thank you so much for the invitation. Happy to chat with you, journalism, soccer, and general life. Appreciate the time.
Si, amigo. Okay, to start things off, you're a journalist. What got you into journalism?
Yeah, I always consumed journalism at a very young age. I read the newspaper, I listened to the radio, I watched TV. Basically, I was on social media. I grew up in Chile in the first 8 years, 8, 9 years of my life. Then we moved to Canada. When I came here, obviously that changed, different networks, whatnot. But nonetheless, I mean, I was just watching games constantly, double headers, triple headers. And since I played soccer and I watched it and I listened and I read a lot, that was sort of a unique answer, to really pursue this career. But nonetheless, I think the fact that it was always the choice, the natural choice, I remember I was like 10, 12 years old, and I told my parents at that age that I wanted to be a journalist so young. And to this day, I've been able to make a lot of those dreams a reality.
Wow, that's amazing. What's your favorite thing about journalism?
I'd say, being in the press box for Canada versus Jamaica has to be at the very top. The connections you make, because a lot of the people that you work alongside with and you get to meet in this industry, a lot of them become friends as well. It's not just colleagues, keep it professional, but you go for a drink with them and you create a lot of memories together, because in this industry, you just never know who you're going to run into. I've met so many people, so many quality people outside of Twitter and whatnot. And when I'm working at the event, doing something for television and whatnot, or even writing. So I'd say definitely the connections that you make, they're very special. And you can tell for sure when you've met a genuine friend, and just the mentors. I've had a lot of mentors along the way that have taught me a lot of things and have helped what a potential career is, has, and could look like. I think the people is the one that makes it the most special for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Without people, what will we have?
Absolutely. That's it.
I never realized you were originally born in Chile. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Born there, 1998. I was actually born during the World Cup matches that were going on in on July. And that's how I remember my dad told me that when I was born, I think Brazil and Holland were playing in the quarterfinal, semifinal, or something like that. I think
Mhm.
that really shaped me. I think it's pretty ironic, to be honest.
What got you into Canadian football?
Yeah, so basically, I had graduated from high school in 2017, and I decided to work, take a gap year and decided to just work and save up a lot of money. I went on a trip to Russia in 2018 for the World Cup, and that was amazing. Obviously, Chile didn't qualify, but I watched Spain, Portugal, France, Denmark, and Switzerland, Sweden. So it was three cities, 3 different weeks in Sochi, Moscow, and St. Petersburg, respectively. Fast forward to September of 2019. I had been following the CPL for the longest time possible.
Wow.
I was very eager to get involved and to really start covering it, just to get a head start. One of my biggest, I don't want to say insecurities, but one of my biggest worries was that, hey, I was 22 years old and I didn't have a portfolio. I didn't have experience. I hadn't started, and so I said, you know what, let's just go for it. So I went to a FC Edmonton game, and I'll never forget this. I go and I talk to Kasim Kimji, who works now for Alfonso Davis' agency. By the time he was the communications director at FC Edmonton. And I introduced myself and I said, hey, I'd like to cover the team now. And he told me what I needed to do to get accredited. I contacted a podcast, Northern 90, someone who at the time, that was the top soccer CPL podcast at the time. And I just got audio for them. I created a YouTube channel, and I think I got like something along the lines of a couple thousand views in around 10 or 12 interviews. So things really snowballed there. Then obviously I got to cover my first ever final, CPL final in 2019. Carpooled with Steven Sanders, someone who I actually grew up reading. Has written a lot of books, has covered Canadian soccer, worked for CBC, TSN, Sportsnet. So the whole thing was pretty surreal. I covered my first final there in Calgary, and then the off season happened, and this is when really I had done around 30 or 40 interviews with a lot of CPL players, and I had created a nice portfolio. I was with several outlets at the time, Canucks Abroad.
I've
I did
heard about that.
about several players playing around the world that had Canadian citizenship and were eligible for the national team. I was also doing some Q&A interviews for World Football Index. I interviewed David Witherspoon on there, Canadian national team player. So I was doing a lot, really trying to get my name out there. And I started a podcast, which fortunately wasn't that successful venture because I was doing it on my own. Obviously, then we'll talk about how my current podcast is doing right now. But yeah, that's how I started. And then the off season happened around Christmas time. And that's when I started to investigate some more. I found that there were a lot of CPL news that they were really delaying. It was a really long off season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started to become an insider. I started to leak player signings, potential CPL expansion news, CPL rule news, just anything that I could find. And, obviously I had done around 30 or 40 interviews. So I had created a pretty good network of contacts, of sources around the league. And that really allowed me to report some really, really solid stories. I'd say it was one of those moments where for my career personally, that's when I really got my name out there. I think I went from something like 500 followers to like 1,300 followers in like 2 months. And that really helped me really get my name out there. And that's how I got started. That I would say I was only 3, 4, 5 months into this whole thing. And then it was sort of like a rapid progression from there. I was also, at the time, I decided to travel to Vancouver, cover the Whitecaps game opener. And keep in mind, this was me doing this stuff without any knowledge of journalism. Like I had not gone to school. So I entered school in September of 2020, and this was still October of 2019, September of 2019, all the way up to March to 2020. And that's when I covered the MLS opener, Vancouver Whitecaps playing against Sporting Kansas. And then I wouldn't say TV debut, but it was a pretty big digital outlet. Bola V Mexico, one of the biggest outlets in Mexico. I interviewed Alan Pulido, who played for Chivas and the Mexican national team, a player who has a very, very big following, over 1 million. So I got to interview him. I also got to interview Roger Espinosa. He played for the Honduras national team in 2 Olympics, 2016 and 2012, in Rio and London. Obviously a World Cup as well in 2010. And I would say that was like my breakthrough, besides obviously reporting all these news. So obviously I flew to Vancouver and I interviewed Espinosa, Pulido, as aforementioned, and at the same time, also got to speak to Freddy Montero. Obviously played for the Colombian national team and Sporting Lisbon. Mostly made his career in the MLS. And I interviewed him for a very big outlet as well in Colombia called Colombiano. Finally, but not least, Christian Gutierrez, who represents Canada right now, but at the time he still representing Chile's U20, had played for a biggest club in Colo-Colo. So after I reported these news, I flew there and I freelanced for the first time in my life. I got paid for all of these 4 interviews. Made a couple $100 just based on that. I wasn't able to break even. Because obviously I'm from Edmonton, so I flew from Edmonton to Vancouver, stayed at a friend's house, some family friend's house, and it was great because I was able to interview 4 players in person. This was before COVID, just 1 week before COVID actually.
Wow.
Just had hit, so I interviewed 4 players, and it was an incredible experience, Graham, because these players had gone to Olympics, World Cup, nerve-wracking at first, but at the same time getting paid for the first time. And having these big Latin American outlets, that was something pretty special. And this was the last week of February. That's how my first 6 months covering Canadian soccer happened. And it was a rapid rise. And then COVID, of course, stalled a lot after.
So to the viewers at home watching, he has this podcast called Northern Fútbol. What's it about?
Yeah, so we cover the Canadian national teams, Canadians around the world, abroad, that is, Major League Soccer, the 3 MLS Canadian clubs, CPL, and we, it's really consistent. I started with Peter Galindo, Sportsnet, and then obviously recently Alex Gonjarusic, who works for One Soccer now and CPL, has just joined as the 3rd member of the podcast. It's great because we cover everything, not just the national team games, but as mentioned, we cover it all. We everything in between. And obviously where we've covered now just more than 65 episodes, and it's gone great. It's really been a success, a real hit. More than 1,500 listeners listen to us every single week on Apple, Spotify, and many other platforms. Honestly, it's gone great. We've really broken the charts on Apple. We've gotten the chance to interview some national team players such as Alter Johnston, Kamal Miller. We've also spoken to Canada Soccer President Nick Bontis.
Wow.
So it's been an incredible experience, and obviously we've been very pleased with the work we've been able to do. Also, just had DraftKings come on as a sponsor. So truly, to be I would never in a million years I would have thought that I would be co-hosting the #1 Canadian soccer podcast in Canada.
Number one. Wow. I'll put the link in the description for Northern Football. And make sure all you at home watch or listen to Northern Football on all platforms. I saw on Twitter that your pinned tweet is that you worked for the Mexico TV broadcast thing. I don't know how to explain it, but what was it like working in the Latin American business?
Yeah, so the video that you're referring to is Azteca Deportes. They are actually the official channel of the Mexican national team in Mexico. They are probably the CBC of Mexico, if we're honest.
I agree.
They have a sports section. That was an amazing experience, covering Forge make its debut in the CONCACAF Champions League against a side like Cruz Azul. And what's it like to work in Latin American media? It's great. I mean, honestly, it's helped me a lot. Obviously making my television debut when Canada played against Honduras in September of 2021, that is. El Salvador as well coming to play. Did something for El Gráfico as well as Diario 10. And then obviously Panama coming into play. I did something for RPC Deportes. Big outlets in those countries, obviously Central America. And then Mexico, of course, being a much bigger market.
Of course.
Azteca, definitely the biggest of the bunch. I would say it's a very different landscape than the Canadian sports media. I'll tell you that much. Obviously, I've never worked in Latin America, perhaps in the future. Obviously, being an international correspondent, covering it from many kilometers away, thousands of kilometers away, actually. Big responsibility because you have to go to training grounds, you have to go to hotels, you have to go to airports. You really have to do everything to cover a story. And sometimes that means you have to take Ubers, you have to take taxis.
Traveling.
And yeah, exactly, traveling. And they're really long days, if I'm honest, 10, 12-hour days, where sometimes you forget to eat, or you're always in constant communication with these networks, that deadline-driven business. So it's been very good. I remember the first time that I went on TV, my palms were sweaty. I really could not. It was tough to control, but now it's completely different.
Yeah, once you get used to stuff, you know what you're doing. You feel more comfortable.
Absolutely. I think that whole thing about the whole quote about practice makes perfect is not a cliche. If you've ever heard the saying, in order to master something, to really get better at your craft, you have to 10,000 hours of work. I completely agree with that. That I really try to believe that from step one.
That's pretty interesting. I have one final question. I don't know if you've been back to Chile or not, but have you seen any Chile teams or the Chile national team play?
I've never been to a game in person. That's something that I wanna do in my life. I would love to. I grew up watching La Roja, the Chilean national team, on TV when I was in Chile, and when I've been in Canada, obviously through streaming and whatnot with my family, mostly my dad. He's the one that really got me into the sport. I haven't been back in Chile since January of 2019. I would love to go back. That is a dream of mine, to really watch that national team in person, or better yet, to cover them. It's nice to obviously go as a fan, but obviously when you go as a journalist, it's a different experience. It's not that you don't enjoy it as much. Obviously you do, but you're there to work, so the experience is different. And I know you and I were talking off camera just before you started this episode. Obviously, you asked me what my favorite club in Chile was, and obviously the big one that you mentioned was Colo-Colo. I'm actually Universidad Católica fan. They are the third most successful club in Chile in terms of titles. So yeah, that's the club that I support as a kid. Never been in person to watch a game of theirs as well. So those two things that you just mentioned, the club and then the national team, those are things that I'd like to do. Unfortunately, they play not in vacation, like not during the new year. To go probably halfway through the year if I'd like to make that happen.
Muchas gracias, Thomas Nef, for being part of this exclusive sneak peek of what to expect for Vibin with G.
Graham, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Anytime. Keep up the great work, and best of luck with this series and with everything down the road.
Oh, thanks, Thomas.